I found you. Now we can go on making stupid fucking videos together. The light is crazy. Y'all know, look at that. Would you just look at that up there? I don't know if you can see it. Look at that. I have the literal sun in here. Look at that fucking thing. Holy shit. Oh my God. Oh my Lord. Jesus. Look at that. I don't even know how to frame a shot. I don't know nothing about nothing. There we go. Maybe that'll work. Good Lord, I look transparent. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I don't think this is feasible. We're going to have to go to another spot. Everybody hang on. Well, here we are. The lighting isn't much better in here. I am a really not good videographer. I don't think that that's something that's up for debate. And I don't mind so much in terms of the things that I am interested in and the things that take up my time, the things that I choose to give my time to. Learning better videography skills is not high on the list. In fact, making YouTube videos is not high on the list. It's one of those things that if I've got room in the schedule to do it, I'll do it because it's kind of fun. And it pushes me way outside of my comfort zone to do this. Way outside of my comfort zone. And I think that's important. I think it's important for brain plasticity. I would say the same thing about reading. That reading is important for brain plasticity. But the whole reason why I started this channel was really just to get comfortable talking to a camera, because I had a little woodworking channel that I didn't take, very seriously. I still don't take it very seriously. I don't take this channel very seriously, and I'm okay with all of that. But I wanted to communicate more on the woodworking channel in some ways. And I had a vision, I still have a vision for it. And it was integral that I be able to talk to the audience and get comfortable talking to an audience. And so I did the most uncomfortable thing I could possibly think of doing, which was make a video channel about books. Because this is deeply uncomfortable. My cat decided to have a snack behind the camera right now. So this is a deeply uncomfortable thing. It's a weird space. I think that book people generally are more wholesome and kind and forgiving than woodworking people. And so my discomfort level is much higher talking to woodworking people than it is talking to book people. But this is still pretty awkward. And I go back and forth about whether or not I want to continue doing this, or if it's just run its course. And I made the solemn promise to myself that I would only make videos that I felt like I needed to make. And I kind of feel that way about all the things that I make and all of the projects that I get myself involved in. I only do it if I want to do it. And I only do it if I have something that I just can't ignore. Sometimes in the creative process, you just have to do a thing. It burrows its way into your brain and it stays there, and it won't let you sleep and it won't let you focus on anything else until it's done, until you make it. And I think that is a common situation with a lot of people. I also think that it's one of those feelings that tends to drive depression in people. I think a lot of people, for good reason, don't have the creative outlet that their brain and their body is telling them that they need. One of the biggest barriers to entry is just having the financial flexibility to invest in whatever your creative outlet is, whether that is sewing or building things out of wood or making vinyl stickers or whatever it is. There's a million possible creative endeavors. And a lot of time the barrier to entry is the materials and the time, because in our culture, time also equals money. So what happens to people is they get that creative urge, this need to make something, this need to do something with their hands, which is a very human need. And then they simply don't have the outlet for it. And I think a lot of times, especially in our day and age, video games are sort of a substitution for that, because there's some amount of interaction between you and the video game, but you're still not able to produce the creative thing that you're longing to produce. And sometimes people are lucky that that's their job. Their job is to make the creative thing, and they can put their entire selves into their job because they are getting that satisfaction, creating this thing and creating whatever the things are that they need to create. And a lot of times it's not just one thing, it's a whole series of things. If you're any kind of person that has a wide range of hobbies, you know what I'm talking about. You know that you have to pick and choose the things that you're most dedicated to, and the other hobbies either die on the vine or they have a different life cycle within your calendar year. And it's one of the ways that you're able to keep the things that you enjoy doing in your life, while also remaining busy enough with the other things that you like to do to have that sort of feeling dealt with on the inside, to have it pacified, and to replace what would have been depression with satisfaction. Satisfaction of a task complete, even if it's a small task or a small creative thing, something that doesn't take a lot of time. We could generalize about this all day long, but my point is that I am overwhelmed with the urge to make things and to do things and to interact with the things that bring me joy. And I'm in a special circumstance in my life where I am able to pick and choose and do those things. I'm in a very privileged position. So I'm not really sure what I'm getting at with this long preamble, other than to say I'm gonna just sort of do what I want here. And I don't really feel compelled to keep up with anything else that's going on in the larger realm of things that are popular, topics that are popular, whatever it is. I'm just driving my own boat here in the direction that the weird captain at the helm thinks we should go. So with that said, I wasn't going to make any more videos until I knew exactly what video I wanted to make. And I mentioned in the last video that I was several books and stories behind and reviews. And although I don't let it bother me, I'm trying to keep up with those things and account for those things. But the thing that I really want to focus on in this video is a particular flavor of medium or media, specifically the audiobook. And I think that it definitely deserves a conversation. I'm not sure if it's a conversation being had in other places, but I think we need to talk about it because there's something interesting that I discovered over the last few months that I think is a new realization for me. So as you know, if you've watched the channel, we went through a really big move this summer. We did a cross-country thing. And, that requires prepping a house to move and then, the physical act of getting everyone and everything moved and then unpacking, and the distance between the two locations, only adds complication. So there's just all kinds of things to worry about and to think about. And so starting, I guess, in, around June, I no longer had time to sit down and read. Sometimes I didn't even have a good place to sit down and read. And my time was filled with lots of physical activity, during and after the move, whether that was, preparing the house and cleaning the house and then driving across the country. All of those things required my attention in other places. And so what I leaned on really heavily, both for sanity and, mostly for sanity, is when I wasn't listening to music, I was listening to an audiobook. My history with audiobooks is limited, and but I've never had a negative feeling about them beyond whether or not I liked a certain narrator, and we'll touch on that in a moment. And I should just caveat that I'm doing this, these reviews kind of raw. I don't have a lot of things prepared, but I wanted to lean heavily on my memories of the audiobooks themselves in order to really get across some of the points that I want to touch on in this video. So the first thing that I had listened to, and I should say that for several of these, not all of them, but for several of them, I was relying on the new YouTube channel, Quasar Spectra. And the fellow that runs that has a really fantastic narrative voice. And he reads at a very good pace. I appreciate the quality of his recordings, and I also like the amateur nature of the recordings. You can hear background noises from time to time, and you can hear when it's raining outside of his window. You can hear somebody very quietly moving a dish in the kitchen because they know he's recording, and there's something about that is very wholesome. And it's very non-corporate. So life is still happening, and you can hear sometimes the turn of the page as he turns the page, or you can hear him adjust himself in his chair. And it's a completely different element. You could compare it to the smell or the feel of a book that you were holding in your hands and reading. But it's adjacent to that, and it's just something interesting to note about the recordings. And I hope that he doesn't push himself to record solely in a soundproof box, because the very subtle ambient noises of his home is very nice. So the first thing that I really dove into during this period of moving was The Enclosure by Barry Malzberg. And the fellow at Quasar Spectra has a great recording of it that he performed. And all in all, this was the first Malzberg that I have really sunk into. I think that I have a vague memory of reading some Malzberg short stories at some point, but I've never read a Beyond Apollo or anything else. But I feel like this was an interesting introduction to Malmsberg because I think I understand him even after this one short book. Now this book has a really interesting ending. There's a part of me that was very unsatisfied with it. But at the same time, I felt, because I have experienced late 20th and 21st century film science fiction, I felt that I knew that the direction that the ending was going to go. And I think we could reference, an M. Night Shyamalan twist, because that's kind of what you're looking at with this book. But the book itself centers around a group of aliens who are essentially being held captive. And it's very unclear the circumstances of their captivity beyond what the narrator chooses to reveal. And it turns out that the narrator is slightly unreliable. So all in all, I had a really great time with this book. I didn't think that it was a superb work of fiction, but I enjoyed it. And I'll say, to sort of start the theme with these audiobooks, is that I feel as though, had I read it, I may have a different feeling about it if I had actually read it with my eyes. And I don't want to get too deep into that just yet, but I have a feeling that I would remember aspects of it in a deeper and more clear way, that certain ideas around it would have materialized in a little bit crispier fashion had I read it. But I deeply enjoy the experience. And the only thing that I can really think of now when I think of that book is scrubbing floors and scrubbing toilets, because I had it on the speaker as I was doing that. So those two things are completely imprinted now. It's not sitting and reading the book. Those aren't the way that those memories are tied together. Typically when you read a book, in my experience, the associated memories of that experience are the space you were in as you sat and you read the book. But in this case, the audiobook and the memory of the book are completely tied to cleaning the house. On the drive, I decided to finally dive into The Star's My Destination, or Tiger Tiger. Well, this is a book that I have DNF'd more times than I can count. And it wasn't because I wasn't interested in the book. It was because the copy of the book that I had was one of these sort of print-on-demand books that are out there now. And it was riddled with typos. And I don't know why, but every time I would sit down and start reading it, and I would find a typo, it would just completely pull me out of the story. And typos don't typically affect me in that way, but this one definitely did. And I know that Bester is known for some sort of experimental print in his works, but that's not what this is. These were legitimate typos. And I think if you've read the print-on-demand copy that I'm talking about, you probably know exactly what I mean, and you've probably seen them. You've probably seen them yourself. So it was really focused on the quality of print that I was in possession of as to why I did not finish the book. But I've been eager to, very, very eager. And so on the drive, I decided to put it on. And of course, a very long drive, multiple days, huge swaths of the country to drive across. And as you're dislocating yourself from a place, I feel that music is the best sort of transitional aid. Having some music, listening to music in the car is one of the greatest experiences. But there comes a point in your drive where you need something different. You need a different thing to focus your attention on. And so right around the Indiana line, I decided to put on the Audible version of The Stars My Destination. And you'll forgive me, I can't remember who the narrator is, because memory is a weird thing with audiobooks. But the narrator was fantastic. He had all of the qualities of a good narrator that I like, which is that there's some amount of acting that has to happen. There's some amount of, very clear metered reading, that has to come through. And you don't want anything that feels too tinny. A lot of the early cassette tape audiobooks that I remember, listening to as a kid, and that you sometimes encounter digitized copies of on YouTube, they have this very tinny feel, and everything sounds kind of like this, like you're listening through a can. And that's fine. There's something interesting about that. There's a sort of vintage feel that is not unpleasant, but it's not necessarily what you're looking for as you're driving across the country with the windows down and the dial turned up. So one of the biggest impressions that I walked away with after the fact was the introduction. In this particular audio edition, and I'm not certain which print edition this is in, but there's an introduction from Neil Gaiman. And as we all know now, because we're in the future now, Neil Gaiman has had some really unsettling accusations pointed at him. And I'm in no position to even begin to understand the veracity of those things, but it sounds really bad. The interesting thing, though, is that in the introduction, Neil Gaiman specifically talks about the particular sexual assault that the main character Gully Foyle perpetrates near the beginning of the book. And he's making it a point that you're meant to hate this character. You're meant to see this person change. And the purpose of the book is to watch you, or is to allow you to watch the circumstances of change unfold in a person and what elicits change, positive change in a person. And in light of the accusations against Gaiman, it actually makes that introduction feel a little different in hindsight. And I remember feeling this way as I was listening to it, was thinking like, that's an interesting way to excuse that behavior. And for what it's worth, I don't believe that Alfred Bester wanted you to excuse that behavior. And it's a scene within the book that is actually done with the same subtlety that it would be done within film in the 1930s, sort of fade to black. It's insinuated. In that way, it is tasteful. But it's something that you're set up for at the very beginning. If you read this introduction, you know that it's coming. You know that it's something that you're going to have to deal with in the main character. And it puts you on a strange foot because, well, how could you get behind a character that would do something like that? So the reader spends an interesting amount of time in this book standing to the side with their arms crossed, looking at Gully Foyle going, And I loved it. I loved that aspect of the book. I loved having a main character that I wasn't totally sure whether or not I was on this guy's side, whether or not I understood where he was coming from. But Bester is fantastic because he, from the very beginning of the book, gives you a really good reason to be on this guy's side because he has been done a great wrong. So initially, when I thought about doing a review for this book, I thought about framing it as the perfect book. And what does that mean? What does it mean to be a perfect book? And I have an argument that I've been trying to formulate in my head about why Tiger Tiger is a perfect book. And I'm not there yet. And I think that one of the reasons why I haven't been able to fully solidify the ideas that I have about this book are because of the circumstances under which I consumed it. And as my memory of the enclosure is tied with cleaning, my memory of Tiger Tiger is driving across Indiana and Ohio and West Virginia and Pennsylvania. So it's a nice memory. I like it. But there's something ungrounded about my ability to analyze it in the way that I would normally analyze a book, because it lives in a different part of my brain. And I'm sure that there's real neurological science behind this about the part of your brain that is focused on holding the read text, and the part of your brain that deals with audio. And I'm not a neurologist, and I'm not a neuroscientist, so I can't speak to this. But I can tell you that in my own personal experience, it feels like they live in two parts of my head. When I think about having read a book and having listened to a book, it genuinely feels like I'm switching sides of my brain to think about them. And I don't think that the experience of listening to Tiger Tiger was any less effective than had I read the book. But there's definitely something less contemplative about it, at least in the moment, because even if I had a notion that I seized on while listening to it and said, oh, I need to remember this point because I want to talk about this later, based on all the other things that my brain was doing at the time, driving a car and trying not to get into a wreck and making sure that I'm still going in the right direction and listening to the audiobook and, I've got to pee and all these other things that are going through your brain, the ability to hold on to those notions is nearly impossible in an active environment like that. And so I'm left with the feeling that I really want to go back and read this again, physically read it and capture it and solidify my own personal arguments about why this is not the best book, but why it is a perfect book. And I do believe that that's an assertion that I could stand behind given the appropriate amount of time reading it. I listened to numerous other things that I'm having an even harder time pinpointing. A lot of this was done, on earphones, unpacking boxes. And, one of the things about unpacking boxes and unpacking a house is that, it's a very stop and go situation. You have to stop and deal with the thing, or I have tiny humans in the house. We have to see to whatever's going on with them, and so you're pausing and you're starting, and you're pausing and you're starting, and you're pausing and you're starting. And I suppose a book can be the same way too. Sometimes you get a page or two under your belt, and then life happens, and you have to go intervene in life, and you put the book down, and you come back to it, and you reread the same page again. And I feel like that's something that can happen in digesting a book in an audio format. You can go back 30 seconds and you can go back a minute and you can listen again. But the consistency of the memory of the book is broken up mentally, in my mind at least, the way my mind works, with all of the other things that were happening while that was happening. And to the point where I can't even gather up all the details of all of them. I remember listening to a Robert Bloch story that was very similar to The Enclosure, but I believe it was called The Maze. I could be wrong about that. See, I can't even remember the title. But it was a fascinating story. Some of it, and it's not very long either. When you do the audiobook, I think it's 45 minutes, but I probably took 3 days to listen to it, because life kept happening around me. And this is how I was consuming this thing, was through an audio format. And then there was a Stanislav Lem book that I geared up and started listening to. And it was one of those things I put on to go to sleep to. And it's a book I fully intend to physically read it very soon. But it was there in audio format. And I said, well, I'm ready to go to sleep. And then you lay there in bed for an hour and you're listening to it in that quasi space between waking and sleeping. You're not really asleep and you're not really awake, and you're still hearing the audio, and it's going in and it's affecting what you're seeing, and you're imagining it, and it's an almost pure imagination space. But the ends of it are like this, where you don't really see where it started, and you definitely don't see where it ends, because sleep happens right there, and then you're gone and the story's gone and you're consuming it as you sleep, but that's unconscious. You don't have any memory of it necessarily, unless your mind works in a very special way. So you start it up again the next day and you listen to some more. Maybe you're doing something else and you get caught up in life. And for me, it's a very ineffective way to consume a book, but it is not unenjoyable. It is deeply enjoyable. And I know lots and lots of people who get through their workday listening to audiobooks. It's literally the thing getting them through the day, is having an audiobook going in their ear. And they're consuming an enormous amount of media this way. And for them, it's the thing keeping them grounded to sanity. It's the thing that is keeping them from going completely insane as they process TPS reports. So there's no ridicule or shame in it whatsoever. But from my own personal experience, I am aware that it's going into a different part of my brain. Then there's a completely different experience that's worth talking about. And this one was really fascinating to me, because after we got moved in and we got settled, I took a weekend to go to Pulp Fest, that was the last video. We talked about Pulp Fest. I think that was the last video.
Jesus fuck, it smells like Febreze in here. God damn it.
Hopefully the last video. But I went to Pulp Fest, and I had this really fun notion in my head of just thinking about Breakfast of Champions. And when I was driving across the country, I stopped at the Vonnegut Museum in Indianapolis and did a little tour, bought a couple of tchotchkes, and felt very satisfied because it had been a bucket list thing for quite a while to go and check out. So I still had Vonnegut very front and center in my head, as he tends to be. And I was on this drive to Pulp Fest to go to Pittsburgh, and I started thinking about Bunny. And Bunny is a character from Breakfast of Champions who plays keyboard at the Holiday Inn. And I thought about what a strange mix of people were probably going to be at Pulp Fest. And, the whole thing is happening in and around a hotel bar. And so my brain it needed to ingest Breakfast of Champions again. And this is a book that I have physically read a dozen times, easily a dozen times. And, but I've never even considered the existence of an audiobook. I had never considered that any Vonnegut book would have an audiobook. Surely, yes, it does. Like I'm absolutely professional audiobooks of all of his stuff. I'm certain now. But until that moment, it hadn't occurred to me that, oh my God. Well, and then the next thought was, well, who the hell would they get to narrate a Vonnegut audiobook? In my mind, the only person who could read Vonnegut was Vonnegut. And there are audio recordings of Vonnegut reading Vonnegut, and it's fantastic, and it sounds like Vonnegut. It's read at the correct pace, because the pacing in a Vonnegut book is essential to the novel. And you can feel it. It's like breathing. You could probably map it out. Anyway, who would they get to do this? Who would they choose to narrate a Vonnegut audiobook? I can't tell you how pleased I was. So I got back on Audible, and of course this is my wife's Audible account, and all I know is that every now and then there's points in the account, and I get a free thing, right? And there have been times when she's been deep into an audio series, and she's like, "Oh, there's no points left," and it's like, "Oh yeah, it's because I did this book on this drive or whatever," and da 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 da. And she's like, "Oh, okay." But I didn't even think twice about it. So if we got free points in there, we're gonna do it. We're gonna get whatever Breakfast of Champions audiobook is on there. And my God, I could not have been more pleased. John Malkovich narrates the audiobook for Breakfast of Champions, and it just seemed perfect. For a book that I could almost recite, it seemed absolutely perfect. And I don't know how this had slipped from my knowledge. I had no idea. I still don't know who narrates the others. I haven't looked deep enough. I kind of want to be surprised about it. I like being surprised about things like that. But it was absolutely perfect. And it was a book that, being so familiar with it, the act of listening to it held a completely different place in my mind. I wasn't trying to hold on to it. It was an act of reminisce. It was an act of appreciating how it was read, because of course John Malkovich did a fantastic job reading it. It was incredible. Such a talked long enough for the audio to die, then I've talked too long, and I need to stop this video. But the point is it's great. It's great. The point is that audiobooks have a place, and I can't see myself consuming audiobooks primarily. But I think that they're really great. And I would also say that they're essential for people who have different abilities than I do. My eyesight, thankfully, is very good. And I hope it stays that way for a long time, but I know that it's possible that it won't. And so there may be a time in my life where I truly lean on audiobooks way more than I do now. The thing that would make those special, that would make listening to those audiobooks special, are the narrators. And the things that I'm doing as I'm listening to it. Maybe I'm laying in a chair. Maybe I'm driving a car. Maybe I'm operating a tractor. I don't know. I don't know what the circumstances would be. Maybe I'm cleaning toilets. But those activities will be associated with the audiobooks. And I'll tell you, when I was listening to the Breakfast of Champions audiobook, and I was enjoying it so thoroughly, a big chunk of it was happening as I was driving through rural Pennsylvania trying to find Falling Waters and the Frank Lloyd Wright house. And I did. I found it, and it was one of those sort of serendipitous moments where, the book just sort of, it just ended at the right moment, I guess, on that drive. And it's such a special book. When I think about recommending it to people as a first Vonnegut book, I kind of shudder, because it definitely doesn't need to be recommended as a first Vonnegut book. Again, I need to shut up. We've already gone too long. Have a great day. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.